They said it was suicide to fight 64 enemy planes alone. They said a P-40 Warhawk couldn't fly with a burning engine. But on a hazy morning in 1943, one American pilot didn't just break the rules of engagement, he broke the laws of physics to save his base. At 23 years old, Philip Adair faced a math problem that should have ended in his death. One plane against 64. His solution involved flying upside down, a jammed control stick, and a level of courage that left even his enemies speechless. Most pilots would have bailed out when the engine caught fire. Most would have quit when the elevator cable snapped. But Philip Adair stayed in the cockpit, and what he did next is perhaps the single most incredible feat of airmanship in the China-Burma-India theater. It was 9:27 in the morning on December 13th, 1943. The location was Assam, India, a place where the humidity hits you like a physical weight and the jungle stretches out endlessly in every direction. Second Lieutenant Philip Adair sat in the cockpit of his Curtiss P-40N Warhawk. He was pulling the aircraft into a climbing turn, probably thinking about breakfast or the letter he needed to write home. But then he looked 3 miles to the east, and his heart likely skipped a beat. Through the morning haze, a massive formation materialized. It wasn't a patrol, it was an invasion force. 64 Japanese aircraft were heading directly for his base at Denjan Airfield. Now, to understand the gravity of this moment, you have to understand the man and the machine. Adair was just 23 years old, but he wasn't a rookie. He had already flown 43 combat missions with the 89th Fighter Squadron. He knew the stakes. He was protecting the Hump airlift, that lifeline of supplies flown over the Himalayas to keep China in the war. But on this particular morning, due to a scheduling quirk and bad luck, he was the only American pilot airborne, just him. Below him, the airfield was waking up. There were 14 C-47 transport planes sitting on the tarmac like sitting ducks. These weren't empty planes. They were loaded with critical supplies for Chiang Kai-shek's forces. There was a field hospital treating 63 wounded soldiers. There were fuel stocks that, if ignited, would burn for days and cripple operations for weeks. If you enjoy hearing about these pivotal moments where history hangs by a thread, take a second to like this video. It really helps us share these forgotten stories with more people who appreciate them. So, Adair looks at his fuel gauge. He has full internal tanks, about 180 gallons. That's good for 90 minutes of fighting. He checks his guns. He's got 650 caliber Browning machine guns. They are heavy, reliable, and destructive, but they only carry enough ammo for about 12 seconds of sustained fire. That's it. 12 seconds to stop an armada. The enemy formation was terrifyingly precise. 24 Mitsubishi Ki-21 Sally bombers were the heavy hitters, escorted by 40 Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar fighters. The Oscars were arranged in layers, above and below the bombers, a defensive cage designed to chew up anyone foolish enough to attack. Intelligence reports from that month were grim. Similar raids in Burma had achieved a 90% hit rate on undefended airfields. If Adair did nothing, Denjan Airfield was going to be erased from the map. He did the math. The nearest friendly fighters were 38 minutes away. The Japanese were 3 minutes out. Standard military doctrine, the rulebook they drill into you in flight school, says that if you're outnumbered more than 5 to 1, you wait for reinforcements. Adair was outnumbered 64 to 1. He had a choice. He could radio for help, shadow the formation, and watch the bombs fall while keeping himself safe. Or he could push the throttle forward and attack alone. Adair pushed the throttle. His Allison V1710 engine responded with that distinctive roar. The manifold pressure climbed to 54 inches, and the P-40 accelerated to 320 miles per hour. Adair knew he couldn't win a dogfight, not against 40 fighters. His only hope was to disrupt the bombers. If he could make them scatter, they couldn't drop their bombs accurately. He positioned himself 4,000 feet above the enemy, keeping the sun behind him. It's the oldest trick in the book, but it works. The Japanese pilots were focused on the target ahead, not the lone wolf stalking them from the sun. Adair rolled inverted and dove. This is the moment of truth. He came screaming down from the 7 o'clock high position. His airspeed built rapidly, 360 miles per hour. The P-40 was heavy, often criticized for being sluggish compared to the Mustang or the Thunderbolt, but in a dive, it was a brick with wings. It was fast. At 800 yards, he opened fire. The 650 calibers hammered. You can imagine the noise and vibration in that cockpit. Tracers arced toward the lead bomber. Adair walked the rounds up the left wing of the lead Sally. Fabric tore, metal sparked. The bomber's port engine erupted in orange flame. Black smoke poured out. The formation panicked. The tight V shape dissolved into chaos as bombers scattered left and right to avoid the flames. Adair had done it. He had disrupted the lead element. But now came the price. He pulled up hard, 7 Gs crushing him into his seat. As he rolled right, he saw them. 40 Oscar fighters were diving toward him like angry hornets. The Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar was a nightmare to fight in a turning battle. It was lightweight, powered by a 150 horsepower engine, and it had these butterfly combat flaps that allowed it to turn on a dime. In a low-speed dogfight, an Oscar could fly circles around a P-40. Japanese pilots knew this. They had shot down 63 Allied fighters in the last 6 months using that exact advantage. Adair knew his plane's limits. The P-40 was a brawler, not a dancer. It was faster in a straight line and could take a beating, but if he tried to turn with the Oscars, he was dead. The tactics were simple. Never turn. Use speed. Hit and run. But Adair couldn't run. If he extended away to reset, the bombers would reform and destroy the airfield. He had to stay in the fight. He had to keep them nervous. The first 4 Oscars came at him in a finger 4 formation. Adair rolled left, pulled the nose up, and fired a quick burst. He missed. The Oscars broke right. Adair reversed his turn, diving away to keep his speed up. 2 more Oscars dove from above. He fired again, missed. His ammunition counter clicked down. 800 rounds remaining. He had enough for maybe 6 more attacks. Below him, the bombers were trying to get their act together. 3 groups of 6 were closing back up. Adair had maybe 90 seconds before they reached the release point over the airfield. He didn't hesitate. He shoved the throttle to the stop and dove again. 8 Oscars followed him down, but the heavy American plane accelerated to 405 miles per hour. The lightweight Japanese fighters couldn't keep up without ripping their wings off. Adair opened the gap, pulled out at bomber altitude, and lined up on the right-hand bomber formation. Range, 300 yards. He fired. Tracers converged on the lead bomber's right engine. The Mitsubishi radial engine exploded in a fireball. The bomber rolled right, streaming fire. Its wingman broke formation to avoid a mid-air collision. Adair kicked the rudder, skidded the plane sideways, a move that throws off enemy aim, and fired at another bomber. His rounds punched right through the thin fuselage. The Sally bomber had no armor protection for the crew and no self-sealing fuel tanks. It was obsolete by 1943 standards, but it carried a heavy payload. Now, the Oscars were swarming him, 12 of them this time. Adair's fuel gauge showed 162 gallons. His ammo was down to 650 rounds. But then, a new warning light caught his eye. The engine temperature. The Allison engine is liquid-cooled. It relies on coolant circulating through the block to keep from melting. Adair had been running at full military power, war emergency power, for 11 minutes. The system was designed to handle that for maybe 5 minutes. The gauge showed 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal was 210. If it hit 250, the engine would fail. He had 3 options: reduce power and die, run away and let the base be destroyed, or keep fighting and risk blowing the engine. Adair kept the throttle forward. 2 Oscars came at him head-on. The closing speed was over 600 miles per hour. It's a game of chicken where the loser dies. Both fighters opened fire at 500 yards. Adair saw the muzzle flashes of the Japanese 7.7mm machine guns. He didn't flinch. He fired back. His heavier 50 caliber rounds had more range and more kinetic energy. At 350 yards, his rounds smashed into the left Oscar's engine cowling. The fighter shuddered and broke. Left, trailing white coolant vapor. Adair had won the joust, but his coolant temp hit 240 degrees. The bombers were now 15 miles from the target. They were reforming again. Adair went for the lead formation one more time. 6 Oscars tried to intercept, but he blew past them at 390 miles per hour. He leveled out and opened fire on the lead sally. His burst hit the wing root, the structural connection to the fuselage. The wing folded upward and tore away. The bomber rolled inverted and spun into the jungle. No parachutes. The formation broke again. Adair had successfully scattered them 3 times. Even if they dropped their bombs now, they would hit nothing but trees. But the cost was coming due. Adair pulled up, and his temperature gauge read 248 degrees. The engine was running rough. He could feel the vibration in the stick. Pre-ignition was hammering the pistons. Then he made a mistake. He lost situational awareness for a split second. 8 Oscars dove on him from above. He saw them too late. He rolled left, but he was too slow. 7.7mm rounds punched through his right wing. Fabric tore, metal buckled. One round hit the aileron control rod, the heavy steel cable that controls the roll of the aircraft. The stick went mushy in his hand. Another burst walked up the fuselage. Sparks flew off the engine cowling. One round penetrated the coolant reservoir. Green coolant sprayed across his windscreen. The temperature gauge pegged past 260 degrees. Steam erupted from the cowling. The oil pressure dropped. The engine was dying. Adair chopped the throttle to save what was left of the motor, but without power. The heavy P-40 started dropping like a stone. He was descending at 1,500 feet per minute. The Oscars circled above, watching. They knew he was finished. And then the engine caught fire. Now, fire in a liquid-cooled aircraft is a death sentence. The burning coolant vaporizes, ignites, and the flames are drawn by the airflow right back toward the cockpit and the fuel lines. If the fire reached the fuel lines on the left side of the engine, the plane would explode. Standard procedure, bail out immediately. But Adair was at 8,000 feet over hostile jungle, 12 miles from home. He decided to stay with the ship. He pulled the mixture control to idle cutoff, starving the engine of fuel. The fire died down. He pushed it forward again. The engine coughed and caught. It was running on roughly 60% power, not enough to climb, barely enough to stay level. The bombers had given up. They were turning back toward Burma. Adair had won the strategic battle, but now he had to survive the tactical one. He turned southwest toward his base at Nagaghuli, 43 miles away. 6 Oscars followed him, like vultures waiting for a dying animal. At 7,000 feet, his oil pressure dropped to 0. Without oil, metal grinds on metal. The heat builds up instantly. The engine should have seized solid within seconds. Miraculously, it kept turning. It was running on momentum and friction. But the Oscars weren't his only problem. Smoke began filling the cockpit, not from the engine, but from burning electrical wiring behind the panel. It burned his eyes and throat. He slid the canopy open, gulping in fresh air. But the slipstream was deafening. At 4,000 feet, the disaster compounded. The right aileron control cable, weakened by the earlier hit, finally snapped. The aileron flopped to full deflection. The P-40 violently rolled right, and the nose dropped. Adair hauled back on the stick with both hands. Nothing. The elevator cables were damaged too. He had no pitch control. The nose stayed down. Speed increased. 200, 220. The jungle was rushing up at him. 3,000 feet, 2,500. He was going to crash. This is where most stories end. But Adair remembered something, a stray comment from a flight instructor years ago. It was about aerodynamics. The damaged aileron was forcing the right wing down. The stuck elevator was pushing the nose down. but aerodynamics work in reverse. If he rolled the aircraft upside down, the forces would flip. The damaged aileron would force the wing up relative to the ground. The stuck elevator would push the tail down, lifting the nose toward the sky. It was insane. It shouldn't work, but he had no other choice. At 1,800 feet, Philip Adair rolled the burning, crippled P-40, completely inverted. -1 G pressed him against his shoulder straps. Blood rushed to his head. His vision turned red, but the nose came up. The descent slowed. At 1,200 feet, the P-40 leveled out, flying upside down at 140 miles per hour. He was actually climbing, slowly, 50 feet per minute, but climbing. The Japanese pilots, circling above, must have been stunned. They watched this American plane, trailing smoke, flip onto its back and refuse to die. One Oscar dove to investigate. Adair saw him coming. He rolled inverted to gain a little altitude, then rolled upright and turned directly into the Japanese fighter. It was a bluff, a desperate move of aggression from a helpless plane. The Japanese pilot, perhaps thinking Adair was crazy or knowing something he didn't, broke away. The Oscars turned east. They went home. They had seen enough. Adair was alone now, but the fight wasn't over. He had to fly this roller coaster pattern all the way home. Inverted to climb, upright to let the fuel feed, because the engine would starve if he stayed upside down too long. Flip, climb, flip, descend. He did this for 11 agonizing minutes. His oil pressure had been at 0 for 9 minutes. The engine was defying mechanical logic. If you're finding this story gripping, consider subscribing. We dig deep into the archives to find these moments where human will overcomes impossible odds. Finally, he spotted Nagaghuli Airfield, the runway, safety. But he had one last massive hurdle. His landing gear was hydraulic. The hydraulic pump ran off the engine. With the engine dying, there was no pressure. The gear wouldn't come down. He tried the manual hand pump on the left side of the cockpit. It took 28 strokes to lower the gear, but he needed both hands to operate it. And if he let go of the stick, the plane would roll and crash. He improvised. He undid his lap belt, wrapped it around the control stick, and looped it through the seat frame. He pulled it tight, creating a makeshift autopilot to hold the stick neutral. It wasn't perfect, but it held the plane steady enough. He grabbed the pump with both hands and pumped for his life. 1, 2, 10 strokes. At stroke 23, he felt resistance. At stroke 28, thunk, the gear locked down. But now, with the gear down, the drag increased enormously. His airspeed bled off to 135 miles per hour. He was barely above stall speed. The runway was 7 miles ahead. Adair's vision was tunneling. The carbon monoxide from the cockpit smoke was poisoning him. He was flying on instinct, his brain slowly shutting down. The tower operators saw him coming, a smoking P-40, flying erratically. They expected a normal landing, but Adair had no hydraulic pressure for flaps. A no-flap landing means you come in fast, 120 miles per hour instead of 90. You need a lot of runway. Nagaghuli's runway was short. 2 miles from the threshold, the engine finally quit. The propeller windmilled to a stop. Silence. The P-40 was now a glider, a heavy brick-like glider with a glide ratio of maybe 6-to-1. He wasn't going to make the runway. He was going to crash short in the jungle, unless... Adair remembered the inverted flight again. Inverted, the wing's camber works differently. It creates less drag at certain angles. He rolled inverted at 1,800 feet, 1 mile out. He hung in the straps, watching the jungle pass above his head. It was disorienting, terrifying, and brilliant. The glide stretched. He was falling slower. A ground crew, chief named Robert Martinez, was watching through binoculars. He saw an inverted plane with gear down approaching the field. He thought it was a Japanese pilot showing off or trying a suicide run. He ran to a .50 caliber machine gun pit and aimed it at the cockpit. He had 3 seconds to decide whether to shoot. He held his fire. Adair crossed the runway threshold at 90 feet, still inverted. He had to time this perfectly. Roll too soon, the nose drops and he crashes. Roll too late, he slams into the ground upside down. At 200 feet, he rolled right side up. The The damaged aileron instantly tried to flip the plane. He fought it with the stick. The nose dropped. The P-40 slammed onto the concrete. The main wheels hit with a force of 7 Gs. The struts compressed. The right main gear collapsed. The wingtip dug into the concrete. The aircraft ground-looped, spinning 180 degrees in a shower of sparks and concrete fragments. It skidded backward for 200 feet and came to a stop. Silence. Then smoke billowed. Fire crews raced out. Adair sat motionless for 12 seconds. Then, calmly, he unbuckled, stood up, and climbed out onto the wing. His legs gave way, and the ground crew had to catch him. They looked at the plane. It was a wreck. The engine was fused solid, piston seized, crankshaft warped. There were 16 bullet holes in the fuselage, 7 in the right wing, 4 in the left. The control cables were severed. Lulu Belle would never fly again, but Philip Adair had saved the day. Intelligence confirmed that all 24 bombers turned back without dropping a single bomb. The hump airlift continued without interruption. Not a single soldier on the ground was killed. Flight surgeons later found that Adair had been flying with severe carbon monoxide poisoning for the last 11 minutes. Medically speaking, he should have been unconscious. He had flown on sheer willpower. Adair was awarded the Silver Star for his gallantry. He went on to fly 95 more missions and became an ace with 5 confirmed kills. He stayed in the Air Force for 30 years, retiring as a colonel. The P-40 Warhawk often gets a bad rap. It wasn't the fastest or the most agile, but in the hands of a pilot like Philip Adair, it was enough. It reminds us that technology is only as good as the person operating it. Adair proved that impossible odds mean nothing when you simply refuse to quit. If you want to see more incredible stories from the CBI theater, check out the playlist on your screen now. And for a deeper dive into the P-40's engineering, we've got a video for that too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.